Last time,
Thanks for
we
giving me a
met
baby
Daniel
boy.
Okafor,
You've made me a
a
proud daddy.
man with ambition in his hands, love in his home, and a slow, silent poison beginning to work its way into his heart. We saw a man who loved his wife, a man who kissed his daughter's forehead and meant it, a man who, on the surface, seemed to be holding everything together. But we also saw something else. We saw the moment he stood alone in that hospital corridor, under cold fluorescent lights, holding a feeling he was too proud to name and too afraid to examine. Disappointment. And we warned you, didn't we, that buried things have a terrible way of growing in the dark. Well, the seed has been planted. Now watch what happens when the wrong people start watering it. To understand what was happening to Daniel Okafor, you need to understand the world he lived in. Because this story is not just about one man, it is about a system, a deeply rooted, generations-old system of belief that had been whispering the same lie into the ears of men long before Daniel was born, and continues whispering it today, in different languages, on different continents, in different households all around the world. The lie goes like this: a man is only complete when he has a son. In Daniel's community, this belief wasn't just cultural background noise. It was architecture. It was built into the way families gathered, the way inheritance was discussed, the way old men looked at young fathers, scanning, always scanning, for the evidence of masculine success that only a male child could provide. It was in the Proverbs. It was in the prayers. It was in the quiet but devastating way a man with 5 daughters was pitied at community meetings, spoken to gently, as though he had suffered a long illness. Daniel had grown up breathing this air. He had never once questioned it, the same way a fish doesn't question water. And now that water was rising around him. After Obiageli's birth, something subtle but significant changed in the way Daniel's family interacted with Adaeze. It wasn't cruel, not openly. These were not villains twirling mustaches. These were people who genuinely believed what they believed, who had been taught what they had been taught, and who expressed their disappointment in the careful, suffocating language of concern. His mother, Mrs. Ngozi, started visiting more frequently. She would arrive with food, always with food, because food was love. Food was access. Food was the vehicle through which she could sit in their home and guide conversations in the directions she wanted them to go. She would admire the babies. She would hold them, coo at them, call them beautiful. And then in the same breath, almost without pause, she would turn to Adaeze with eyes full of practiced warmth and say things like, "You need to see that woman in Oguta. She helped your cousin's wife, 3 girls just like you. And then she went to see that woman, and 9 months later, a boy strong like his father." Or, "Adaeze, are you eating the right things? They say when a woman eats too much chicken during pregnancy, it affects the child's gender. You should eat more red meat." Or, and this one was the most devastating, delivered always with a smile, "Don't worry, my daughter. 3rd time is the charm. God has not forgotten Daniel." As though God had somehow failed Daniel by giving him daughters. As though Adaeze were a machine producing defective goods. As though the 2 little girls sleeping in the next room were consolation prizes. Adaeze heard every word. She absorbed every implication, and she said very little. Because she was a woman who had been taught that a good wife endures, adjusts, and remains gracious. But at night, after the visitors had gone, and Daniel was asleep, and the house was quiet, she would lie on her side of the bed with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and she would feel the weight of it all pressing down on her chest like a stone. She never told Daniel how much it hurt. She didn't want to add to his burden. That was her first mistake.
The construction business was growing, which meant Daniel was spending more time with men, contractors, engineers, government officials, older businessmen who had taken an interest in his work. And men, when they gather, talk. They talk about money, about politics, about football, and they talk about family. It was at a business dinner in early 2003 that Daniel met Chief Obiora Eze. Chief Obiora was 62 years old, wealthy in the way that only men who have spent 4 decades accumulating can be. Quietly, solidly, immovably wealthy. He owned 3 companies, a hotel, and a large compound in the best part of the city. He wore his agbada like a second skin and spoke with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never once in his adult life been told to wait. He also had 4 sons. He spoke about them constantly, their achievements, their positions in his company, the legacy he was building for them. His whole identity as a man seemed organized around the fact of his sons, and he made no effort to conceal the pride that radiated from him whenever their names came up. That night, Chief Obiora had too much palm wine and not enough filter, and he looked at Daniel across the table and said, loudly enough for 3 other men to hear, "Daniel, my boy, you are sharp, you are hardworking, you will be great. But I hear you have 2 daughters and no son yet. Don't let that continue for too long. A man needs a son the way a house needs a foundation. Without it, everything you build will belong to strangers." The other men laughed, not cruelly, but comfortably, the way men laugh at things they all privately believe. Daniel laughed too, but the laughter didn't reach his eyes. And on the drive home that night, he sat in silence while his driver navigated the dark roads, and Chief Obiora's words played on a loop in his mind, merging with his mother's voice, his uncle's voice, the collective voice of every man and woman who had ever implied that his family was incomplete. A house needs a foundation. Without it, everything you build will belong to strangers. He looked out the window at the city lights blurring past, and for the first time, he didn't think about Adaeze when he thought about his future. He thought about his son. The 3rd pregnancy. By mid-2003, Adaeze was pregnant for the 3rd time, and the atmosphere in the Okafor household had changed in ways that were difficult to name but impossible to ignore. Daniel was still present, still providing, still by most external measures a good husband, but there was a new distance in him, a way of being in the room without fully being there, a way of answering questions with the minimum number of words required, a way of looking at Adaeze that had lost some essential warmth that she couldn't quite identify but felt every single day. She tried to bridge it. She cooked his favorite meals. She asked about his work with genuine interest. She laughed at his jokes and pressed her hand against his chest at night and told him she loved him, meaning every syllable. Sometimes he would soften. Sometimes the old Daniel would surface, the man who argued with her about Bible passages and danced with her in the kitchen and called her Adamo, my Ada. And in those moments, she would breathe out slowly and tell herself she had imagined the distance, that she was being oversensitive, that everything was fine. But everything was not fine, because Daniel had begun to pray a different prayer, not just for a healthy child, not just for safety during delivery, but specifically, desperately, for his son. He had begun to attach his sense of peace to the outcome of this pregnancy in a way that was quietly, dangerously unhealthy. He had let other people's definitions of manhood replace his own. He had allowed the noise outside to drown out the voice inside, the voice that once, not so long ago, had looked at a leaning wedding cake and 2 shining eyes and known with complete certainty that he had everything he needed. That voice was still there, but he could no longer hear it. The pregnancy progressed. The months turned. Adaeze grew rounder, quieter, watchful. She could feel the weight of expectation in the house like a physical presence, sitting at the dinner table with them, riding in the car with them,
lying between them in bed at night. She began to pray too, not because she believed a son was worth more than a daughter, but because she was afraid of what a third daughter might do to her marriage. She was afraid, and she would not admit this to anyone, not even God at first, that her husband's love for her was becoming conditional, that it had terms and clauses she had never agreed to, that she was being quietly evaluated and found wanting for something that no woman on earth has ever had the power to control. Because here is what Daniel Okafor and his mother and his uncle and Chief Adaeze and every other voice in that chorus of expectation had never stopped to consider. The gender of a child is determined by the father's chromosome, not the mother's, never the mother's. Adaeze knew this. She had read it quietly, alone, in a health pamphlet at the clinic. And she has sat with that knowledge for a long time, turning it over in her hands like something fragile, wondering what it meant, wondering if it mattered, wondering if truth had any power at all in a world that had already decided what it believed. She said nothing. She kept her secret and she waited. In February 2004, in the same hospital where Chisom and Obiageli had been born, Adaeze Okafor gave birth to her third child. The delivery was long, harder than the previous two, the kind of labor that leaves a woman hollowed out and luminous at the same time, emptied of everything except the raw, primal facts of survival. When it was over, the nurse placed the baby on Adaeze's chest. Adaeze looked down. She already knew. She had known for weeks, in the quiet way that mothers sometimes know things before anyone tells them. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead and held her for a long, long moment. Then she looked up at the door waiting for Daniel to come in. And when he walked through that door and the nurse smiled at him and said the words, "Congratulations, sir, it's a girl," Adaeze watched her husband's face. And what she saw there, just for a second, just a flash before he controlled it, broke something inside her that would take years to name. They named the baby Nkechi, that which belongs to God. Daniel held her, kissed her, said the right things, but that night he did not come home. He called to say he was staying at a friend's place. Work stress, he needed to clear his head. Adaeze lay in the hospital bed with newborn Nkechi sleeping on her chest, and she stared at the ceiling, and she did not cry. She was too tired to cry. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she had not yet fully explored, she was beginning to understand something important, something that would take time to fully form, something that the next few years would carve into her like letters into stone. That she was stronger than he knew, that her daughters were more than he could see, and that God, the real God, not the one being used to justify other people's expectations, had a plan for this family that nobody in that city, not his mother, not his uncle, not Chief Adaeze with his 4 sons and his hotel, nobody had seen coming. Daniel didn't leave tonight, not yet. But something left him, something important, something he won't realize he's lost until it's far too late. 3 daughters, a wife who is quietly becoming someone extraordinary, and a man who is walking, step by step, towards the worst decision of his life. If this story is hitting different, drop a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And whatever you do, don't go anywhere.